I think, shall we get started? Hi everyone. My name is Kathy Yang. Today, we want to talk about, discover and respond solutions. So maybe let's start it with a, raise of hands. How many of you have worked on investigations or litigations? Or wow, so many people. Awesome. So you probably feel the pain here and there about, you want to find the data that's relevant quickly to respond to some of the requests, either legal or internal investigation. But it's both difficult and sometimes costly and risky. So today, we want to show you this pillar, and more importantly, two solutions that will make your life a little easier to power your internal investigation, external litigation, or just, compliance requests, quickly to find, and respond with confidence. So we'll talk about advanced e-discovery, helping you save costs and lower risk for your e-discovery needs. And we also want to talk about advanced audit, which is a powerful tool for, getting insight fast and also, have a, longer-term retention for your investigations. With that, I'll turn it to Iram to talk about advanced e-discovery.
Thanks, Kathy. The clicker isn't working, so we're going to do the old school walk back to the laptop and click forward. So like Kathy said, we're going to spend some time talking about e-discovery. And you guys have probably been to a few of these e-discovery sessions, and we always have a really cool slide that says data is exploding. So this time we went with your budget is exploding. So real quick, the numbers for e-discovery are pretty impressive. I mean, they're really high. People spend a ton of money in this space. And it's a good indication of just how problematic and how hard it is. So some quick stats, $3 billion. That's how much people spend just on the software alone. And if you were to throw in there the cost for everything else around e-discovery, it balloons up to $10 billion, which is a significant number. And if you take that 10 and then you break it down, 75% of that cost is in review. Who can guess why review is so expensive? Any ideas? Why is review the most expensive part of e-discovery or investigations? Yeah, you guys are all bringing up really good points. It's hard, right? It's super hard to do. Think about the wage that you pay the person that's actually doing review in some cases, right? This is a lawyer. So that is really downstream. You're probably wondering, so why are you guys talking about this? That's way downstream from what Microsoft does. And the issue is, thanks. The issue is when we took a look at what customers are doing, how do you do e-discovery in the cloud with us? And this is kind of a quick indicator, a quick kind of view of what is going on. Most of you are doing, we search our service, we're looking for content, where we're looking for mailboxes that belong to people, OneDrive sites that belong to people, and then we'll take that entire content and we'll take it out of the system. So we're exporting now entire mailboxes, entire OneDrive sites, and then the funnel represents these other third-party tools that you guys are using to kind of start reducing that data, right? You don't want to review all of it. That would be way too expensive. So then you use a bunch of tools to start reducing the data as much as you possibly can. And then at the bottom of the funnel is the last piece, right? This is the actual piece that you'll either send to attorneys to do review, or if you have to produce it to law enforcement or whoever, this is the piece that you actually reduce. So when we looked at that diagram, we were looking for opportunities. Where can we help you? Where is the opportunity for us to kind of make a big impact for you? And what we found was we have quite a bit of information that we can provide to you as you start selecting the content before you export, right? So the idea is instead of having to blindly take an entire mailbox out or blindly take an entire OneDrive site out, if you could actually take a peek at that content, if you could look at that content, if you could be smarter about how to collect that content and how to call that content, then the whole idea around advanced e-discovery is, if we click one more forward, is we want to take that export line and we basically want to bring it all the way down in the flow, right? We want to say, if you can analyze if we click forward once, yeah. If you analyze that content in place, hold it in place, reduce it in place, then what we want is for you to only export the smallest amount of content that you actually need to export. And we even have some other really cool ideas downstream of maybe you don't have to export. Maybe there's some really cool things that we can do where we can just keep the data in a central location. So that's kind of the premise. This is where we think we can make a significant impact, right? The point is, if we make it so that it's the smallest amount, then The downstream effects, right? Imagine now review, which is the biggest piece of e-discovery, significantly reduces too, because you're not giving attorneys entire mailboxes to say, here, find what is relevant. You're giving them the pieces that are more reduced, maybe the timelines are better, maybe the topics are better, and we'll show you some of the tools to do that. So I'm going to jump into demo, but before we go into a demo, just real quick, high level, these are the pieces. This is where we made most of our investments for advanced e-discovery. Some highlights, we don't want to spend too much, and we have a ton of content for you, so we don't want to spend up time here. Custodians, so for those of you that are familiar with our core e-discovery offering, and just for those that are not, I guess the chain is you could hold content in place, you could create a case around it, and then you could export, right? So you're doing a search, you're holding, and then you're exporting. So this is basically your core e-discovery. In advanced e-discovery, this is all the features that we're throwing on there. And so the first one, for example, is custodians. For the core, you need to tell us, this is the mailbox address, this is the OneDrive site, these are all the pieces of information that we need to be able to collect this content. In advanced e-discovery, you give us a name. You tell us who it is that you want to investigate or discover, and then we'll do the mapping in the background. We'll tell you, look, this is their mailbox address, this is their OneDrive site, these are the teams that this person belongs to, the SharePoint site, so we'll show you all that stuff. It's really, really cool. So why don't we just jump in the demo. And we have a story that we built the demo around. So company A versus company B. Company A had an employee that was a product manager, shady project manager, and they were building a really cool VR experience, and product manager leaves. Competitor now has the same similar project that they released before company A. So company A sues company B and says, hey, this is IP theft. We had this idea first. We registered it. You guys just beat us to the market. It cost us millions of dollars now because we can't take that market back. So we want to sue you guys. And usually in e-discovery, once that happens, right, you say, okay, we have to share information to see who's telling the truth. So let's do that. Let's go through a quick demo to see if we can find the truth. Okay, so when you open an e-discovery case, and actually, let me back up so we can orient ourselves here. So if you go to the Security and Compliance Center, we have on the left nav, and then we have e-discovery. We have e-discovery and advanced e-discovery. So again, e-discovery, the first piece is the core piece, right? This is search, hold, and export. It's built to kind of say, this is the entire set, go. Advanced e-discovery, which is what I clicked on here, these are all the new features that we're describing today. So I'm gonna click on a pre-created case. And so we drop you off at a home page just to give you some really interesting stats on this particular case, right? So these are the number of custodians that you have. If you're communicating with them, meaning like hold notices, this is the number of people that have actually responded to that hold notice, that acknowledge that hold notice. And then we keep track of just some of the jobs that you run. We put a lot of transparency into this product. We want to make sure you know that because this is a service and you're saying things like export all of this stuff or search across my entire tenant, we want you to know the progress of some of these jobs, right? Because some of these jobs can take a while. So you'll be able to have a dashboard that says, these are all your jobs, and these are the ones that are progressing, and these are the ones that maybe failed. So then from there, you go to custodians. And I want to show you real quick. This is now how you tell us the content that you're actually looking for. So you type in the person's name. We go and validate this name. By the way, some of you guys are probably going to ask later, inactive mailboxes, can I get those? So the answer is yes, you could actually get those inactive mailboxes. So if you have a case and it's for an employee that is no longer at the company, but you still have that content, it's still in play. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong with this. So then once you put the person in here, right away we tell you, okay, we found a mailbox and we found a OneDrive site, and it's already pre-checked for you. If you don't care about either of those, you could uncheck those, but let's say that the person did not have a OneDrive, it would show up like this by default, right? And it would gray it out for you. It would basically tell you, hey, this person does not have a OneDrive account, it's grayed out, don't even try to look for it. But let's say that we want everything. I think I need to step away from the... So that first slide was, this is all the content that is unique to that user, right? There's only one mailbox address that belongs to them, there's only one OneDrive site. But we got requests for things that are shared. This is like I have Teams content or I have SharePoint content. It's still part of this case. And actually, I don't want to treat it as non-custodial, meaning I don't want to treat it as just a generic source. I need to attribute this content, I need to map this content to a custodian. So how do I do that? How do I find out where this user is on the network? So if I do add, you'll notice that now we're showing up, look, these are all the shared resources that you have in your tenant. And let's say that I care about teams, and I want to choose a team. So we'll run out, do a search, and we'll tell you, look, these are all the team sites that this user is a member of. Which one would you like to include? And we're going to pick Obsidian. So this is the code name of the project that we were talking about from company A. So let's see what's going on around Obsidian. We're going to hit choose and save. And now we're keeping track that you have one team site for this user. And the last question is, do you want to put a hold on this? So what does hold mean real quick? Hold in Microsoft does not mean that we start making a copy of everything. A lot of you guys use like journaling systems, and that's kind of the way those work, right? As you start just immediately making copies of content, just in case you might need that content for this stuff, investigations or e-discovery. That can get expensive, right? Our point of view is don't make copies until you absolutely need to make copies. So when you tell us put this content on hold, what we're actually doing is we're just watching that location to see if anything has changed or if the user's trying to delete something, and then we'll grab a copy. And then we'll make it available to e-discovery. So the user thinks everything is fine. I'm hitting delete, it's gone, it's out of my experience. But e-discovery knows that there's a hold on that location. So it grabs that, puts it in a hidden folder. And now when I run a search, it'll hit all of that content, right? It'll hold all of that content. So it's a much more efficient way of holding. All right, so we're going to cancel out of this. I'm going to show you real quick. So communications, legal hold notices. Many of you use third-party tools to be able to tell your users, hey, your content is on hold. Don't delete this stuff. These are the instructions you have to follow. So we decided, since we have some pretty good metrics on who your users are, you're telling us these are the custodians. You're also telling us these are the data sources. We have a ton of information. So it's kind of easy for us to say, okay, let's help you build that hold notice. And I'm going to edit one just so that we can save a little time. And so in here now you can build the entire hold notice, right? You can say these are the instructions, and you've got some really cool links in here that let you go straight to a portal, for example. Let's say your C-suite gets in trouble often. You can send them a portal that says, look, these are all the cases that you're a custodian of, and you could manage them in one place, right? You could acknowledge everything, you could see everything in one place. So this triggers an email to the user. The user says, oh, yep, I see this hold notice. There's an acknowledgement link on the bottom, and that tells the system that, yeah, I read this notice and I acknowledge it, and now you have that record, right, which is really important in e-discovery. You need to be able to say, yes, I did send them a notice, and yes, they did acknowledge. And we even have some really nice nagging features too, so if users are not paying attention to it, we'll send reminders often, and then if it exhausts, you can even send escalations. Like we'll look in Active Directory, who's that person's manager, and then we'll start nagging that person instead. So that's communications. Let's say you got all of that set up, and now you're ready to search. We're going to skip a couple tabs here. So in search, this is another thing that's kind of unique to Microsoft. So we don't journal, right? We're not taking a copy of the stuff, and then when you run a search, we're not running a search against that journal. There's no lag there. When you do search, you're hitting the actual live system. You're going out to all of these live mailboxes, live OneDrives, and if the content is on hold, even that stuff that's hidden, that's in play too, right? So this is where you get to say, this is the stuff that I'm looking for. And maybe you use dates, or you use keywords, or you can use metadata. And we have a kind of simple to use interface. I'm just gonna type in here. It asks me which custodians do I want to include in this search, meaning all those data sources that we mapped earlier, right? The mailbox address, the OneDrive site, the team site. I don't have to recall those anymore. I just have to say, hey, I want to search Irvin's stuff. And the system knows, okay, Irvin means this mailbox address, this OneDrive site, this team site, and it kind of scopes that search for me. And so then when I come here, I could use these condition cards to build my search, right? And these are all of the different metadata pieces that you can use to say, this is a rough cut. This is kind of what I'm looking for, and I want to be able to go look for this content in the live system. So then when you run your search, and I'm going to do the baking show style here, and give you a pre-cooked one. So when you run a search, we give you some interesting stats. Right on the bottom, we say, okay, these are the number of items we found. And if you want to validate this, so before you go further downstream, if you want to see some high-level stats, what is this about? Like, what did I come back with in the search? You've got some statistics. So you can say, okay, these are the location types. These are the search hits, the item count, the size. And you can get pretty granular. You can go, okay, give me my most popular results or locations, and then break the query down into pieces, and by location, and then give me my hits and my size. So this was really kind of meant for you to say, I'm going to build this search. Sometimes they're going to come back with a lot of results. And before I start collecting this content, I want to make sure that I'm on the right track. I want to see if the statistics are right. Sometimes your attorneys will appreciate this because they might use this to negotiate, right? If somebody came to us, Microsoft, and said, I want everything with the word office in it, I mean, that would be impossible probably. So this lets your attorneys go back and say, look, this is, when you told us these terms, we ran this against our system, this is too much. You're asking for too much, so let's negotiate terms to see what we can come up with. So you can iterate through this sort of statistic process. But once you're set, like once you say, okay, this is the search, this is kind of coming back with what I want, then there's this add results to review set. So this is now when we say, okay, we went to the live system, we found a bunch of results, but the last thing we want to do is give this document that is on the live system to an attorney, have the attorney tell us what they think about this document, and then this document changes, right, because it's in the live system. We can't have that. So when you say add to review set, this is when we're actually taking a quick snap of that document, and we're presenting it to you, we're presenting it to you in this format for you to be able to review this content. So all of the results from all of the locations and all of the custodians that you just selected, all of them will appear here eventually. Here we go, sorry about that. And so now you get to really turn on this data, right? So one big benefit of us taking this snapshot is now we can throw things like analytics against this data. So have you guys heard of Equivio? Does that brand sound familiar? Yeah, I see some nods. All right, so Equivio was an acquisition we made a while ago, and the premise there is they do a really good job of telling us these are all the content that are related to each other. And that's important when you're doing review because, say for example, you come across an employment form, and you have 10,000 versions of this employment form. What you don't want to do is you don't want to pay an attorney to look at each one of those one at a time and spend money telling you that this is no good, this is no good, this is no good, right? So that would cost way too much money. So what you do want to do is you want to say, group these things by similarity. If I pull up an employment form, tell me that there are 10,000 other very close copies. And so now I can analyze this content and bulk tag. I don't have to individually tag. I can select all 10,000 and say, yeah, this is all kind of the same stuff, no good. That saves you a tremendous amount of money. So the way you do that is, we came up with some features, and we'll jump into the analytics in a little bit. I just want to tease that. The first thing that we want to show is if this grid is hard to consume when you first walk in, because there are, in this case, 8,600 items. But imagine, we've talked to cases that are 15 million items, right? Millions of items. So these things can get really big. And that's really hard to consume. So one of the ideas we had is, instead of showing you an item by item every single time, maybe you need to consume this slightly differently. Maybe it's a little easier to make decisions if you can look at this graphically. Right? So instead of now making decisions and building queries, and if you don't really know KQL or it's hard for you to build these searches, we decided, look, these are some really cool points of view that are probably going to be helpful for you. So as you're trying to consume this content, we will show you this data, we will build this data for you. And like one, for example, is a custodian. Right off the bat, we'll say, these are the custodians that you collected from. This is a breakdown of the number of files for each of this custodian. And so maybe let's say, I really want to focus on one person right now. I don't need all of it. So I can just interact with the chart and say, yep, I care about Megan. And I'm going to close this. And now you'll notice all of these charts reset. All of them reset to make sure that now they are only going to show you the content because you said I only care about Megan. So all of the other filters that are telling me, well, what's the breakdown on the target population? How many of these are errors? How many of these are attachments or documents? In the emails, how many are inclusive? And inclusive is telling me if there's a really long thread, let's say that there's, you and I went back and forth 30 times on an email, you shouldn't have to read 30 messages, right? Our point of view is we'll analyze that thread, and then we'll show you, out of those 30 messages, there really are only 2 inclusives, meaning the 2 messages that contain all of the other context for the rest of that thread. So don't waste your time reading 30. Just read these 2 inclusive pieces, and you've saved yourself a ton of time. So we'll show you graphs that kind of let you shortcut this information. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the results. And then I put together a search just to kind of save us some time. And this is going to reduce my set a bit. Just want to show off a couple other features that are really neat. We're also announcing at at Ignite, that we're doing something for teams that is kind of unique. It's actually really, really proud of this feature. We worked really hard on this feature. And it's persistent chat review, right? And this is something that has been around for a while. eDiscovery has struggled with persistent chat for a long time. Imagine cell phones, right? You collect a cell phone, you need to review the content of a cell phone. You can have a conversation between two people go on forever. And so if you say, I need to look at these two people's conversations, you'll end up with a massive amount of content. And when you run searches, usually the way this is architected is each of those thoughts, each of those messages is an individual item, right? So if you say, okay, I'm looking for information between Kathy and Antanu, but I only want to hear when they say the word foo. Well, the system says, oh, okay, there are 10,000 messages between them. One of these says the word foo, and that's what you get, just that one thought that says the word foo. And it's hard to kind of understand, well, what were they talking about? Like, what was the message before this or after this? And so we had to come up with a neat way to say, we're going to get persistent chat. We're going to take a stab at saying, this is kind of where we think the conversation ends and starts. And then when you say, I'm searching for the word foo, instead of giving you just that single message, we'll give you that context. We'll give you that conversation. And here's the really neat part. You can now treat that conversation as a document. So if you need to tag this conversation as if it were a Word document, you could do that. If you need to redact that conversation, you could do that. And the other thing that we did that was really neat is, although you can consume this, so this is a Teams conversation here, although you can consume this, you could also still get to the detail. So we're not hiding, we're not dumping all of that rich metadata that belongs to that specific piece. All of it is still in play. All we're doing is we're making it easier for you to consume, right? You tell us, this is what I'm looking for. It's Teams chat. We'll build those chat conversations for you. We'll bring that conversation back, and then we'll still tell you, look, this is who, when it was sent, who it was sent by, when it was read. All of that information that we have will be available. So I'm going to close out of Teams. The other thing that we wanted to show, which is also really exciting, is when you interact with some of this content, another thing that's really expensive in review is when you're telling your attorneys, hey, can you tell me how much of this content might be privileged? Because the last thing I want to do is when I produce content to anybody outside my organization, I cannot send them anything privileged. Yes, I understand that there's a clawback thing that you can bring stuff back, but it's too late. Like, I've already put really bad stuff out there. I do not want to do that. And so we're trying to help with that. Predictive coding, this is a thing that's been around for eDiscovery for a while now. The problem with predictive coding is that we put the burden on the users. Right? We basically said, hey, we've got these really cool ML models, and they're going to help you a ton because they're going to do some research for you. So as you're looking at documents, it's going to kind of learn what you're doing, and then it'll do stuff for you. But you're basically telling this attorney, the way you do that is you have to tell it what a needle looks like. And you probably sat through another presentation earlier when we were doing the classification conversation. So it's the same thing, right? You're telling these attorneys, hey, go find a bunch of needles, and if you can show these needles to the system, then the system will know what to look for. And attorneys will usually tell you things like, well, but like if I knew how to find the needles in this thing, I would just do that over and over. Like, I don't need a system to help me. If I knew how to get those things, that's the hard part. So what we did to kind of help with that is we're introducing these out-of-the-box models. So you don't have to train them. Your attorneys don't have to train them. We basically train these models for you. And so when you say, hey, I've got some content, and it might have some privilege in there, can you help me identify that? This is what this is doing, right? Is we're saying, okay, you can build your tag panel, and we'll show you right on this tag panel that in this case, and now this model is kind of unique. It does two things. Actually, it's saying, okay, I'm going to look for any content that might look legal, but I'm also, if you give me a CSV and you tell me who your attorneys are, I'll make sure I flag right away any communication between you and your attorney, because that's an easy win. And so we'll show you a box that says, yeah, this is one of those messages that was between you and an attorney, so you should probably hold that as privileged, right? Where if you had another message like this, for example, it would say, this one has both, right? It was with an attorney, and it happens to have some legal content. So the machine learning will actually look for both of those, the metadata and the content, to look and flag for you. Now, you probably noticed we have this viewer that's letting you see this content. This was the payoff, right? Is you have all this rich analytics. We collected all this content, and now you can actually look at it. We are not just supporting office types. We will also support, I think we're up to around 300 file types that we support. So you'll be able to interact with this content right in the viewer. There's no need for you to export and use a third-party viewer. You can see it right in place. And because we have access to our friends that build some really cool viewers, we even let you do things like interact with the notes, right? Some third-party discovery tools that you guys probably are using, as soon as you have any kind of hidden content like comments and notes, you have to download that file, use the thick client to be able to see that, and then go back into the review system to say, yeah, this is bad or this is good. We were able to turn on the Office Online viewer, so now you can interact with this and see it right there, right? You can see these are the notes, these are the comments, and you can make your decision without having to download any of this content. Thank you. Thanks. I should. Thank you. All right, so let's get back to the story. We're looking for dodgy stuff to see, did somebody leak content? Are they doing bad stuff with Project Obsidian? And again, to shorten time, we found that there's a document here. Hey, it's got Project Obsidian as an attachment. It's actually out to an external user. And this is a query you can build right in here. You could actually tell the system, only show me external domains. And it'll give you a list. And you can see those external domains and say, ooh, these are interesting, this, this, this. And it'll show you that content. The other really cool thing is, maybe I just came up with the attachment. I got lucky, I found the email, but I don't see the attachment. We will show this related content on the bottom, right? So now if I click here, it'll say, yep, this is the entire family. Even though your search didn't find this, we know that there's a related item, there's an attachment to this document, so we'll cheat and we'll give it to you right away. You could also do that with, like if I close this and I go to this one here, this is a really cool example. So this one now is saying, here's a document, and it's telling me that there are some near duplicates to this document. And if I see this now, this is telling me, okay, there are 2 near duplicates to the document. And this little icon is telling me that this is the one that's in play. But if I want to take a peek at the near duplicate, it's going to render it for me here in the viewer. And then if I say, well, while it's rendering, actually, I don't really care about reading that document since it's telling me that it's a near duplicate. I want to know why it called it as a near duplicate. And more importantly, I want to see the difference between the 2 documents. And I think we're having some Wi-Fi issues. Okay, here we go. And so it'll light up the document, and it'll say, okay, we'll do a text comparison. We know that they're near duplicates, so we flagged it right away. And then if you show me a comp, we'll put both documents up, and we'll tell you exactly where the differences are. And if you can see on the scroll here, I can go straight down, and it'll tell me where the differences are. So now the attorney can say, is this material enough for me to treat them separately, or is this close enough that I can just bulk tag them? So back to that employment form thing that we were talking about, this is a really big time saver. So then now once we found all the content and we're ready to move forward, the idea is you could now say, all right, I've got everything. Let's say that I tagged everything as ready for export, and all my downstream processes of review are complete. Now I'm actually ready to do something. I'm ready to send it off to either a third-party review system if you want to get further review on like relativity, or if you want to just produce straight to the opposing party. This is where you do the export, and you say, okay, I want all this content, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to export. And so what we do is we just ask you, what is it that you want to export? Do you want just a load file? And then what a load file does is we give you a CSV basically that says these are all of the metadata for all of the documents, but you can include any tag information or not. You can say you want the native files or not. And if you have the native files and you have Teams chat or Yammer chat in there, this is another really cool feature. We will ask you, do you want to go legacy mode, meaning back to the world where everything is an individual thought? And we left that there in case your third-party tool cannot support this new way of reviewing persistent chat. We didn't want to break any downstream processes for you, so you can say that. You can say, yeah, when I'm ready to export, I'm going to kick it back to legacy mode, and then everything will work downstream. Or you can say, no, I want the conversation files. I like this experience. I want this to be the experience, even if I go downstream to another review tool. And so what we do is that view that you were looking at earlier with the Teams, we'll generate a PDF. We'll still give you the metadata for every single thought, but at the end of that row where it points to the native file, they're going to point to that conversation file. So what that does is if you light it up in a third-party tool and you say, I want to word search for the word foo, it'll still come back with that individual piece, but when you want to render it, it'll give you the entire conversation, right? So that same experience will be consistent even if you're not in the Microsoft tools. So I want to leave some time for Otney to cover Audit, but I want to hit one more feature that we're announcing here at the show. And this was a big ask by our advanced e-discovery customers. They were asking questions like, this is awesome. We're building a lot of cases, we're doing a lot of stuff, but now I need to keep track of how things are going at the tenant level. Like the dashboard that I saw for the cases was great. I can see what's going on for this case, but now imagine, I have 100,000 mailboxes. I want to know like who's on hold and why is it on hold, but at a tenant level. And so we built these reports at the top. These are all tenant level reports. So if you have the appropriate rights, access, you could say, show me all of the custodians, every single custodian across the entire tenant, and tell me whether they're on hold, tell me whether I sent them a hold notice or not. And if I go to the communication tab, it'll even tell you whether they responded to that hold notice, right? So now you have a tenant level view of all the stuff that's going on. And then in the data source tab, this is now telling you these are all the sources that you have in play, whether it's an investigation or e-discovery, and this is what the status is. They're on hold, and this is the case that they're related to. Oh, I felt like I talk a ton. Any questions before we move on? All right, why don't we give another opportunity? Oh.
So in the investigation, is there permissions built in so you can have multiple teams doing investigations, but they can't see each other's investigations on the dashboard?
Yeah, good question. For those that couldn't hear, it was access to cases. Like if I have a big team and they all are working individual investigations or e-discovery, can I make sure that there are enough access controls so that they're not seeing each other's cases or getting into each other's content? And yes, we have that. So we have two different roles. One is called an e-discovery admin. That means that person can get into everything, whether they're a member or not. And there's e-discovery manager. That means you can only get to the cases that you either created yourself or that somebody gave you access to. Good question. All right, well, I think we're going to, oh, go ahead. Yeah, so we get that question a lot, the endpoint collection.
So that's something we're thinking about as a principle. We don't announce a date for something that we don't have direct line of sight, high confidence date. So it's something we're thinking about, nothing to announce right now.
Yes, it'll keep it from going away from you, the e-discovery or investigator. The experience of the user might feel like it went away, but it's still there.
It'll stay around.
Yeah.
So it will stay around, and then if the employee leaves the company, you have a choice of making that an inactive mailbox. So that way it's preserved for legal purposes, but it's gone.
Whole thing is preserved, yeah. All right, I think we'll probably go for another round of questions once we're done with audit.
Okay, so I will talk to you about advanced audit. That's something that's new that we're announcing here at Ignite. IRM just showed you e-discovery, and all of that was around content. It's a celebration of content. What documents do we have? What can we search? What can we find? But as you all know, if you're doing an investigation, it's not just about the content. You also need to understand behavior, activity. Let's say IRM's a dodgy guy. He does something suspicious. You found the document, the smoking gun. But you want to know, did he do it? Did he really share this document externally? Was he leaking it? Was he sending it to somebody, let's say Kathy, who's his co-conspirator? So for all of that, you need to understand what people were doing. And so we have a capability for auditing. The auditing capability gets used a lot. So inside Office 365, we see about 60 million audit log searches every day through a combination of UI and API. We see about 15 billion records that are processed every day, and we have 1,500 event types. So this is one of our largest features. We spend a ton of resources to enable the audit log and the activity monitoring and the activity recording. But what we hear is that this audit feature is amazing for IT admins. If you're the Exchange administrator or the SharePoint administrator and you want to see how it's being used, you want to monitor that, that's great. But if you want to do an investigation, then the auditing capability isn't good enough for that, and for a few key reasons. One is that it's missing some important events. If you have to reconstruct the timeline of what happened, this investigation that you're carrying out, and you want to know what happened, we don't have all of the events to support that. So we call out some examples here. So let's say that your earnings report got released, and you want to know who might have leaked it. you want to know if there's a mail that had that earnings report that is shared internally. You want to know how many people actually read that mail. So who did they? Iram and Kathy might have received the mail, but maybe only Iram read it. So Kathy's automatically disqualified as a suspect. You want to know if somebody's like an Edward Snowden. He's trying to search across his SharePoint farm to see what he can exfiltrate out. You want to know what he's been searching for, things like that. You want to know if there's a Teams chat or meeting, what happened, who was the participant. So for all of those kinds of more detailed activities that support investigations, we didn't have them in the basic audit that we have right now. The second thing is that it's really hard to make sense of all of these audit logs. There's a lot of data. And so if you want to correlate a set of activities across a timeline or a set of events, you have no easy way to do that. So insights, we have a lot of data, but we have few insights. And finally, a lot of these investigations can last for a long time, but our audit logs only last for 90 days. And so if you don't complete your investigation, you're out of luck unless you basically copied all of that activity data outside of our system into a third-party system, any of the common vendors out there. And that's expensive. Like I talked about the volume of data that gets generated. If you have to take that data out and you have to store that somewhere else, that's a lot of money. So what we are doing to address all of those gaps is we're announcing this new capability that we call advanced audit, and it'll have 4 key pillars to that. So one is it will have additional high-value events to power investigations. So it's meant for investigators. It's not just for IT admins. We're going to give you processed insights to show you context and key patterns. So what we did is we went around, we asked a lot of folks who are either security analysts or who work in security investigations, cybersecurity teams, or in legal teams, folks who do legal investigations. What are the common patterns, or what are the common questions they're trying to answer? And so we're trying to make sure that it's easy to carry out those common types of investigations. We're going to give you longer-term retention so that instead of 90 days, you'll get up to 1 year of retention for audit logs. And then finally, we hear a lot of requests from customers to give us faster access to data. And so but today we throttle the audit logs quite a bit. And so what we're saying is that if you're an E5 customer, you'll get a much higher bandwidth in terms of how much of the audit logs you'll get and how much you can download. And so all of these capabilities are part of the new advanced audit offer and will be available to E5 customers. So with that, I'm going to show you a demo of what that means. The demo, just like the eDiscovery demo, is built around a story or a scenario. And so the scenario is where a confidential document got leaked, and you have to identify, first you have to find where that content is, and then from that content you have to identify who had access to it, who might be suspicious in this event. And then from that, once you've narrowed it down to a suspect, you need to see what else was that suspicious person doing. So you're going from content to behavior and activity, and then from behavior, you're trying to see what else is going on. And so this story, this investigation is enabled now through the new audit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what that looks like. Okay, so just like before, we're going to start with content. So we're going to start from eDiscovery. And I already have a case created for this investigation. So I'm going to go straight into it. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for an earnings report that got leaked. And so as Ira mentioned, we support tenant-wide searches, so you can look across your tenant. This is a really powerful capability. So you can see I've searched across all of the mailboxes, all of the SharePoint sites in my tenant to see where this earnings report might be found. I can use the statistical views that Iram showed to further refine this, but I'm going to assume we do all that, and I'm going to create a review set. So in this review set, I have found the earnings document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search within that a little more. So I have a few canned searches, and so what I've done is I can now find the emails where this confidential report was sent out. So you can see that this person, Megan, she sent out the confidential report in 5 emails. And so as an attachment, if I open up any of these, you can see that this mail has an attachment. It's the earnings report. And so anybody who had access to that email or that attachment is automatically a suspect in this investigation. So what I can do is I can, if I look at who these mails were sent to. You can see there's Adele is one of these persons, and Alex was another one. And if I look at all of these mails, you can see that Megan was corresponding with Adele and Alex. And so now you want to say, okay, if it was Adele and Alex, or Megan herself maybe, who are potential suspects, you can go into the audit log search. And now what you can do is, inside the audit log search, you can say, okay, show me in this time range, so in the October 10th to October 30th time range, these people, this is the document, the name of the attachment that I got from my search in eDiscovery. What happened? What activities happened around that? And you see that from the results, you can see that Alex not only previewed it, viewed the result, the document, he also downloaded it, which looks maybe suspicious. And all of the activity seems to be around Alex. So now you narrow the focus to Alex as a potential suspect. And so you want to see what else Alex is up to. So you can do another audit log search, and I'm moving over to there. And so what I'm doing is I want to look at what kind of searches he was doing. This is, as I said, one of the new high-value events that we're shipping. It's not something that you could see before. So now if I look at the searches that Alex was doing, I can go into the details for each search. And I can look at the search terms, which is something that wasn't possible before. And you can see that he's searching SharePoint for the Contoso acquisition proposal. And maybe he's not a member of that acquisition V team, so that looks suspicious. You can go in and you can see, okay, he's also searching for the FY20 strategy memo. So you can see, you can start reconstructing the events, or the timeline of events of everything Alex was doing around that time. And you can start making the case that Alex is the person who leaked that document. So now that you've identified Alex as being your potential suspect, you can go into back into the audit log experience, and you can create a retention policy. And so what this new retention policy does is you can say, I want to set this up as long term. And you can say that I want to set this up just for Alex. And so that's my policy for Alex. And now, instead of 90 days, you got a year. So this way, you can make sure that his activity logs are preserved through the next 1 year, so that if you have to keep this investigation going, those logs don't get lost. So with that, my demo is ended. But I just wanted to call out one last thing before I switch back to the slides, is that everything I've shown so far is the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center. We're also lighting this up in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. And so if you go to the solution gallery that I'm hoping that you guys have seen in some of the other sessions, you'll see under Discovery and Response, you can see Audit, you can see eDiscovery, and so you can add these into your navigation. And so if you do that, you'll see both of these light up. So you got Audit, you can click into that, and so you'll see the new Microsoft 365 version of the same audit log search experience. And so as we add more depth, you'll see the features light up here. So with that, I am going to switch back to my slides and just close out the session with a couple of callouts. One is that what we showed you today was 2 solutions that help you do investigations and handle things like litigation e-discovery. So at least in Microsoft, we get about each year a certain volume of legal requests. These could be the courts, it could be the government, it could be a third-party subpoena. And there's a certain volume of that. We have a fairly large litigation profile. But the number of investigations that happen within the company is maybe 20 to 30 times more. So these are HR matters, these are financial matters, these are tax controversies. And so for all of these reasons, our investigations teams use this combination of e-discovery and advanced e-discovery for looking through content, and audit logs to look through behavior and activity, and use that to basically solve all of these investigations. So we think that these are really powerful capabilities. We didn't have a lot of time to go through this. We kind of rushed through it. So we have more detailed sessions, more detailed breakouts tomorrow. So if you have a chance, you should check out the resources that are available to you online, as well as go to some of these compliance sessions that we're planning for the next couple of days. With that, I think that's the end of this session. We're certainly available for any questions.